Hello, dear friends. Many people talk about the humanitarian funds, but this will be not released until it is decided by the Dragon family, who are the rightful owners of the gold, and this will not be released until the right conditions are in place to prevent the theft of fabulous sums intended for the economic liberation of mankind. Those who say that the prosperity funds are a myth or a scam are working for free for the bankers who try to steal them and make them disappear. Opinion piece. The humanitarian funds soap opera. Debt and gold control the world. Gold flowed to China along the Silk Road. It was a global trade in silks, spices, and treasures. From the Roman Empire to the Byzantine and Spanish empires, bankers decided to control the system with gold. The Japanese accumulated far more gold than the Nazis did. Japan seized gold from China in Operation Golden Lily. Japan's rapid recovery may have been due to that gold. History of the famous collateralized global collateral accounts. Agreements to use the funds for development were breached. They were intended for global development and humanitarian projects. These collateral accounts were abused by a banking elite for selfish purposes. The Kennedy assassination and 9/11 delayed the success of this global project. The rightful owners of the gold from the global accounts are the Dragon family. Let's start. The history of the global financial reboot project is a very complicated soap opera of which I am ignorant of many details, but I will try to simplify it today by talking only about the famous global collateral accounts and their relationship to many other events throughout a summary of information provided by Michael Henry Dunn. The history of the global collateral account is broad and complex, going back some 250 years and based on debt and gold. The current global control of the Western banking oligarchy dates back to the early years of the 19th century. Their strategy was to gain control of the world's gold supply in order to maintain their power throughout control of the world's currency and its underlying collateral, debt and gold. The Silk Road. For 2,000 years, the world's gold flowed to China along the Silk Road from the Roman Empire to the Byzantine and Spanish empires. In exchange for the silks, spices, and treasures of the East, control of this gold became essential when the bankers of Europe decided to seek control of the world's financial system. This story begins in the ancient world during the Han Dynasty in the Greco-Roman era, when countries in the Middle East and Europe were connected to countries in the Far East throughout an extensive network of trade routes which was known as the Silk Road. In fact, countries such as Cambodia, Indonesia, India, and especially China were rich in exotic spices, precious commodities such as porcelain items, and of course ornate silk fabrics, among other beautiful rarities bought and sold in the ancient world. The primary method of payment for all these products, and universally accepted even today, was gold and silver, and for thousands of years this enormous trade took place. China was able to accumulate great treasures of gold and silver in addition to precious stones. Needless to say, this didn't go unnoticed by the aristocracy of Europe, particularly Britain, who sought to take the riches of Asia by hook or by crook. Using the naval fleets of the East India Company, Britain was in fact able to addict millions of Chinese, including much of the Chinese elite, to opium. At the time, the British Admiralty was the most powerful military force in the world. Operation Golden Lily. After 1930s, as the Japanese Imperial Army plundered Southeast Asia, Emperor Hirohito launched Operation Golden Lily with the aim of recovering and hiding his war booty. At the end of the World War II, General MacArthur's troops seized part of the treasure and raised funds to finance the fight against communism. Operation Golden Lily is the well-documented story of Japanese gold-collecting teams who infiltrated key gold-holding nations long before the military invasions of China and other nations, with the express intent of seizing the hundreds of thousands of metric tons of gold that had accumulated in Asia, primarily in China. The Japanese accumulated far greater treasure than the Nazis, with the knowledge and cooperation of certain European banking interests. Golden Lily was an operation during World War II in which the Japanese Imperial Army looted gems, gold Buddhas, coins, and precious metals from all over Southeast Asia. The loot then made its way to the Philippines, from where it was later transferred to Japan. Towards the end of the war, however, the Allies began to gain control over the Pacific, and to protect their loot, Prince Chichibu, Emperor Hirohito's brother, hastily built 175 secret tunnels throughout the Philippines to protect the war booty boxes. This is the famous General Yamashita's gold. After the end of the World War II in Japan, the Cold War era began in the world, and there were agreements between the US and Japan to establish Okinawa, Japan, as a base for the US Army. It is also said that the US and Japan signed secret agreements for Japan to deliver gold in order to protect Japan from wartime reparations after being responsible for the deaths of millions of human beings. Another conspiracy floating around the internet regarding the world's resurgent loot is to avoid inflation and government scrutiny. Gold may be part of the reason Japan's economy recovered so quickly during its reconstruction and post-war atomic bomb devastation. The gold deposits have been shelved, but this could explain why Hirohito remained on the throne after the terror Japan inflicted on Asia, and the victims of the war demanded reparations from the Japanese and received no compensation. Gold lent and not returned. By the 1930s, Asian royal families had seen that some of their gold and silver assets in Southeast Asia were being looted by the Japanese, and they needed to do something about it. In 1938, the Chinese Kuomintang government sent 7 warships loaded with gold and silver to the U.S. Federal Reserve for safekeeping. In return, the Chinese received 60-year gold bonds, the famous gold guns. A few years later, in 1944, the Bretton Woods Conference took place, at which the US, France, and Great Britain were given a 50-year mandate to modernize and transform the world for the better. Back in this new global financial system that had just been established, was now estimated at 2 million metric tons of gold held by this group of Asian royal families, also known as the Dragon family. By August 17, 1945, President Sukarno of Indonesia had been elected M1, or monetary control of this large cache of assets granted under United Nations Resolution MISA 81704, called Operation Heavy Freedom. These assets are better known as global collateral accounts and were originally intended to be used for the modernization of the world throughout various humanitarian projects. The Dragon family are the rightful depositors of these accounts. In 1955, it was shown that the International Monetary Fund, which was also created at Bretton Woods, was not keeping its word, and was instead serving only the interests of the banking and political elite. It was at that time that a growing alliance began to see that these funds were being used to fuel Cold War tension, and decided to vigorously oppose the shady banking clique. In 1963, this alliance pooled its financial resources to create the Green Hilton Memorial Agreement, which was signed by John Fitzgerald Kennedy and President Sukarno, and finalized on November 14, 1963. This agreement was to use global collateral accounts for world development and humanitarian projects, along with a new U.S. Treasury bond, a new international bond backed by gold, and would end the Federal Reserve System. Just eight days later, JFK was assassinated. Where is the gold? The official total of the total amount of gold said to be above ground since mankind began mining the precious metal is approximately 160,000 metric tons. Evidence now indicates that a more accurate figure is well in excess of 2 million metric tons. During World War II, the Japanese dug tunnels and bunkers throughout Southeast Asia to store gold mainly in Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. After the war, some of the gold was discovered by the Allies and was incorporated into a system set up by European central bankers before the war for this very purpose. The exact total of wealth in the off-ledger accounts is unknown, but it is said to be in the billions of dollars in gold, platinum, and gems, plus an undetermined amount in Federal Reserve bills and other currencies. How did the nations come to agree that the accounts would be used for humanitarian programs? At the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, when the soon-to-be victorious allies met to create a new global financial system, the International Monetary Fund was created. In the late 40s, President Sukarno of Indonesia was appointed monetary controller on behalf of depositors to monitor and enforce the famous global collateral accounts to rebuild war-torn countries. Abuse. How did the banking elite abuse the accounts? The central banking families had already put in place essential structures to seize and control this wealth. The Bank for International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, the Council of Foreign Relations, and the United Nations, all of which were funded by elite banking figures. Agreements to use the funds for development were breached, and the banking elite proceed to use them for their own purposes, blocking access by depositors. President Sukarno of Indonesia had been appointed M1 or monetary controller of the accounts, since much of the assets are stored in hidden bunkers in Indonesia, but was removed from power after making a deal with John Fitzgerald Kennedy to use the funds to back new US Treasury dollars, in a direct move against the power of the central bankers. Kennedy's assassination prevented this move from succeeding. The central bankers put in place a system that allows the Federal Reserve to block anyone other than the banking elite from using the accounts, preventing the real owners, the depositors, from using the assets for humanitarian programs, as was originally intended. The Dragon Family. The Dragon Family is a group of ancient wealthy clans in Asia who are the rightful owners of a large amount of gold in the global accounts outside the ledger. The Dragon Family has been trying for decades to use the accounts for their original purpose, and sought Mr. Keenan's help because of his reputation as a well-connected, tough-minded international businessman. The story of this theft and Mr. Keenan's feeling of $1 billion lawsuit against elite figures and institutions, including the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, the Italian government, the Italian financial police, and others, was first rebuilt by Benjamin Fulford, Forbes magazine's former Asia finance editor, who traveled to Italy to conduct initial investigations where an attempt was made on his life. The story was later picked up by best-selling author David Wilcock, who then also received death threats, confirming the account in an investigative article on his influential blog. The 110-page lawsuit was first filed in federal court in New York. Neil Keenan's appearance at the forefront of these events dates back to the 2009 theft of $144.5 billion in Federal Reserve notes that were entrusted to Mr. Keenan by the Dragon Family, the group of family wealth clans in Asia, who are the rightful owners of large amounts of gold in global accounts outside the ledger. The bonds that were stolen from Mr. Keenan were Federal Reserve bills given to the Dragon Family in payment for the gold deposited in the accounts, bills that the Fed continually blocked from use. Mr. Keenan's lawsuit represents the first formidable attempt to defeat this theft. Predictably, his life is in danger. He has survived 4 assassination attempts to date, and now has the protection of numerous allies around the world. Mr. Keenan is currently in Indonesia, finalizing settlements with Indonesian elders and Chinese officials who have lineal claims to most of the assets in the accounts. Mr. Keenan is in possession of key documents such as the original Green Hilton Memorial Agreement between Kennedy and Sukarno and the Black Book, secret records of the accounts, etc. Much other evidence can be provided. In addition to Mr. Keenan's participation, other key players can be brought to the table as part of the interview process, including Indonesians involved in the guardianship of the assets, powerful Asian financial officials and others. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.